Have you ever felt frustrated trying to convince someone to stay with you? Maybe in a romantic relationship, with friends, or even at work, trying to get others to accept or value you. The truth is, the more you try to persuade someone to stay by your side, the further you drift from what truly matters, your inner peace and your own growth. Today, I want to share something powerful with you. Don't try to convince anyone to stay with you. Instead, there's something much more effective that you can do, something that will free you from that need for approval and allow you to live a fuller, more authentic life, in tune with Stoicism. What should you do? Stick with me until the end of the video to find out, but I can tell you that the change begins within you. 1. The problem of trying to convince others. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. When you try to convince someone to stay with you, whether in a relationship, friendship, or any other connection, you are putting your value in that person's hands. In doing so, you surrender control of your sense of worth, linking it to the approval and acceptance of another person. Instead of focusing on who you are and what you can offer to the world, you're investing your energy in trying to control something that is ultimately beyond your reach, the decisions and emotions of others. This can lead to a cycle of stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Imagine you're in a romantic relationship where you sense your partner is losing interest. The fear of rejection and abandonment creeps in, driving you to constantly prove your worth. You might become more attentive, showering them with affection, making sacrifices, or going out of your way to be agreeable. You might even begin to compromise on your own values, needs, and boundaries, doing things you normally wouldn't, just to maintain the connection. But despite all your efforts, nothing seems to change. That desperation to convince someone else to stay doesn't spark any real improvement in the relationship. Instead, it only wears you down, making you feel increasingly helpless and frustrated. What's worse is that this behavior tends to create the opposite effect of what you intend. People often pick up on the insecurity and emotional neediness behind the attempts to convince them. Instead of drawing them closer, it can push them further away. It's important to realize that true connection, whether in love, friendship, or any other relationship, cannot be built on a foundation of emotional persuasion or manipulation. Authentic connections arise from mutual respect, shared values, and natural affinity, not from efforts to convince or win someone over. This problem extends far beyond romantic relationships. In friendships, you may find yourself striving to be the perfect friend, always available at any time, just to be appreciated and accepted. Perhaps you go along with plans you don't enjoy, agree with opinions you don't share, or give more than you get, all in an attempt to ensure that the friendship remains intact. Over time, this can lead to resentment and burnout because you're not living authentically. You are essentially sacrificing your own needs in the hope that the other person will see your value and choose to stay. The workplace is another arena where this issue often plays out. Maybe you find yourself constantly seeking recognition from your boss or colleagues, trying to prove that you're indispensable. You stay late, take on extra projects, or go out of your way to accommodate others, all with the underlying goal of securing approval and acknowledgement. Yet, no matter how hard you work, the external validation you crave may not come, or worse, it may come only temporarily, leaving you constantly chasing after more. This need for approval can trap you in a cycle of overwork and stress, where your self-worth is tied to the opinions of others, rather than your own internal standards of excellence. In all these cases, whether in romantic, personal, or professional relationships, what's really happening is that you've forgotten one of the key teachings of Stoicism. We cannot control the actions, thoughts, or decisions of others. We can only control our own responses. Trying to manipulate or influence how others perceive you is a futile exercise because their thoughts and emotions are entirely outside your sphere of control. When you focus on convincing others to stay or appreciate you, you're giving up your own power. You become reactive, living at the mercy of other people's decisions and opinions. This not only undermines your inner peace but also erodes your sense of self-worth. You start to believe that your value is dependent on external factors, on whether or not others choose to stay with you or appreciate you. From a Stoic perspective, this is a fundamental error. Stoicism teaches that true contentment and peace come from within, from aligning your life with your own values and principles, rather than seeking validation from others. When you stop trying to control or influence others and focus instead on living virtuously, you reclaim your power and independence. You begin to live in a way that is true to yourself, and ironically, this often makes you more attractive and respected in the eyes of others. This doesn't mean that relationships, friendships, or workplace dynamics are unimportant. On the contrary, relationships are a vital part of life. But they should be based on mutual respect and authenticity, not on a constant effort to convince others to accept you. When you live according to your values and let go of the need for external validation, the people who genuinely appreciate and resonate with you will naturally stay. Those who don't may drift away, and that's perfectly okay. 2. Stoic philosophy and internal control. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius have given us timeless wisdom on how to cultivate happiness and inner peace. According to them, our sense of well-being doesn't depend on what others think, say, or do. Rather, it is rooted in how we manage our own emotions, attitudes, and responses. At the core of this understanding is one of Stoicism's most powerful principles, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, in his Enchiridion, emphasizes that life presents us with two categories of things, those we can control and those we cannot. What falls outside of our control includes external factors like other people's opinions, actions, and even fate or circumstances. We cannot decide how others perceive us, how they treat us, or whether they choose to stay in our lives. No amount of effort or persuasion can guarantee that someone will love you, value you, or stay loyal. Attempting to control these things is not only futile but also a source of great frustration and anxiety. What we can control, however, is immensely powerful: our own thoughts, decisions, actions, and reactions. We have the ability to choose how we respond to the situations and people in our lives. This is where our true freedom lies. By focusing on what is within our control, we regain power over our lives and emotions, freeing ourselves from the constant worry about things beyond our influence. Let's take a common scenario. You're in a relationship, and you sense that your partner is drifting away. Your instinct might be to try harder to convince them to stay, perhaps by changing yourself, making more sacrifices, or bending over backward to please them. But no matter what you do, you can't control how they feel. Their emotions, just like anyone else's, are their own. Trying to force someone to stay or love you is an attempt to control the uncontrollable, and it often leads to deeper emotional pain. Instead, what you can control is your own behavior. You can decide to act with self-respect, to value your own worth, and to nurture your inner peace, regardless of the outcome. This principle of control applies not just to romantic relationships, but to all areas of life. In friendships, at work, or in social settings, we often invest too much energy in trying to gain approval or acceptance from others. We stress over how we are perceived by our friends or colleagues, working tirelessly to impress them, hoping for validation or recognition. But the truth is, we cannot make others like us, appreciate us, or give us the respect we think we deserve. We cannot control their thoughts, emotions, or reactions. This realization is liberating because it shifts the focus back to what truly matters: how we handle ourselves. Consider a work scenario where you feel undervalued or overlooked despite your best efforts. You might feel tempted to work harder, take on more responsibilities, or seek out praise in the hope of winning recognition. But this approach often leaves you feeling burnt out and dissatisfied because the recognition you're seeking is something outside of your control. The more you chase after it, the more it seems to slip through your fingers. The Stoic response would be to redirect your energy toward what you can control: your own work ethic, commitment to excellence, and sense of satisfaction in a job well done. Whether or not others recognize your contributions is beyond your reach, but your pride in your own effort is fully under your control. The wisdom of the dichotomy of control also encourages emotional resilience. When we understand that we cannot control external events, we stop being emotionally reactive to every setback, rejection, or disappointment. For instance, if someone disrespects or criticizes you, the Stoic approach is not to dwell on the offense or become consumed by a desire to change their opinion. Instead, you can choose how to interpret the event, how to feel about it, and how to respond. By exercising this internal control, you can maintain your composure and avoid being swept up in emotional turmoil. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reflected on the idea that the world is unpredictable, and people will act in ways that are beyond our control. He reminds us that the only thing we truly own is our mind, the way we think and perceive the world. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he wrote. This doesn't mean we become indifferent or disconnected from others, but it encourages us to focus on cultivating our own virtue and character rather than trying to manage the uncontrollable elements of life. When we fully grasp the dichotomy of control, we unlock a powerful mindset shift. We stop exhausting ourselves trying to bend situations or people to our will. We no longer waste energy manipulating circumstances or striving for approval. Instead, we live from a place of freedom and authenticity, knowing that we can always control how we choose to respond, even when we can't control the outcomes. 3. Stop persuading and focus on personal growth. So, what should you do instead of trying to persuade or convince others to stay in your life? The answer is simple, yet transformative. Focus on your own personal growth. Rather than channeling your energy into trying to control the emotions or decisions of others, invest that energy into improving yourself. Focus on building your character, living by your values, and becoming the best version of yourself. In doing so, you'll naturally attract the right people, those who truly matter and appreciate you for who you are, not because you've convinced them to stay. Imagine you're in a work environment where you feel undervalued or overlooked. It's tempting to try to win over your colleagues or your boss by constantly going the extra mile, seeking their validation, or attempting to impress them. But this often leads to frustration when your efforts don't seem to yield the recognition you're hoping for. Instead of wasting your mental and emotional energy trying to control what others think of you, redirect your focus inward. Work on honing your skills, mastering your craft, and achieving personal excellence, not for external applause, but for your own sense of fulfillment. When you do this, you'll find that not only do you feel more confident and grounded, but your work will also speak for itself. And as a natural byproduct, the people who truly value excellence will notice and appreciate your efforts. This shift in mindset also applies to romantic relationships. If you're in a relationship where you feel your partner's commitment or interest is fading, it can be easy to fall into a pattern of overextending yourself, doing more, compromising your needs, or trying to win them back. But in doing so, you're neglecting the most important relationship, the one you have with yourself. Instead of trying to persuade someone to love you or stay with you, focus on cultivating your own happiness and self-worth. Work on being the best version of yourself, not to impress or win over your partner, but because you deserve to live a life of fulfillment and purpose, regardless of external circumstances. When you focus on personal growth, something remarkable happens. You stop relying on the approval or affection of others to validate your self-worth. You no longer feel the need to chase after people, hoping they'll see your value. Instead, you become secure in the knowledge that you are enough as you are. And when you operate from this place of inner strength and self-assurance, your relationships improve naturally. People are drawn to authenticity, confidence, and self-respect. The right relationships, whether personal, professional, or romantic, are built on mutual respect, not manipulation or persuasion. This doesn't mean you become indifferent or closed off to the people around you. On the contrary, when you focus on personal growth, you become more emotionally available, present, and capable of building deeper, more meaningful connections. You engage with others from a place of genuine interest, not out of a need to prove your worth or secure their approval. This authenticity allows for healthier relationships, where both parties can appreciate each other for who they truly are, without any pretense or effort to control. In the long run, healthy relationships, whether friendships, romantic partnerships, or professional connections, are built on mutual respect and shared values. The need to convince someone to stay is a sign that the relationship may not be on solid ground. When two people are truly aligned, there's no need for manipulation or persuasion. Each person values the other for who they are, and they choose to stay in each other's lives because of that mutual appreciation, not because one person has worked tirelessly to convince the other. Another important aspect of focusing on personal growth is that it teaches you to embrace solitude and independence. You become comfortable in your own company and find joy in your own pursuits. This independence is key to maintaining healthy relationships because it prevents codependency. When you don't need someone to stay in order to feel complete or validated, you give them the freedom to make their own choices without pressure. And paradoxically, it's this freedom and self-assurance that often makes people more likely to stay in your life voluntarily, because they see that you are someone who is whole, not seeking validation from others. 4. Stoic acceptance and emotional freedom. Accepting that you cannot control what others think or do is an incredibly liberating realization. However, this acceptance doesn't equate to becoming emotionally detached or indifferent. In fact, true acceptance in the Stoic sense allows you to let go of the emotional weight and anxiety that come from trying to control others. It frees up mental and emotional energy that you can now direct towards something far more important: your own well-being, inner peace, and the quality of your relationships. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." This profound statement isn't about ignoring pain or pretending difficulties don't exist. Rather, it's about choosing how to perceive and respond to the challenges life throws at you. It's a reminder that while you may not be able to control what happens, you have complete power over how you interpret and react to events. If someone decides not to stay in your life, whether it's a friend, a romantic partner, or even a colleague, it's important not to internalize their decision as a reflection of your worth. Their choice is beyond your control, and accepting that fact gives you the emotional freedom to move forward without being weighed down by feelings of rejection or inadequacy. Let's take a closer look at this with a real-world example. Suppose a close friend begins to distance themselves from you, and eventually stops seeking your company altogether. In many cases, the first reaction is to overthink, wonder what went wrong, or to bend over backwards trying to fix the situation. You might feel compelled to constantly reach out, seek explanations, or attempt to rekindle the friendship. However, from a Stoic perspective, this behavior only deepens your emotional distress, as it focuses your attention on what is out of your control, another person's actions and feelings. Instead, Stoic wisdom encourages you to pause and reflect. What is within my control? The answer is your response to the situation. You can choose to respect their decision, no matter how painful it may be, and redirect your energy towards self-reflection. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this situation to grow? By focusing on what's within your control, you create a powerful shift in mindset. You stop wasting energy on external events you cannot change, and instead, you turn inward, toward personal growth, self-improvement, and resilience. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or pretend that loss and disappointment don't hurt. Of course, these situations can be painful, and Stoicism doesn't advocate for emotional numbness. However, it teaches you to face discomfort and sadness without being consumed by them. By accepting reality as it is, without trying to manipulate it or change it, you open the door to emotional freedom. You learn to experience emotions without letting them control you. Over time, this practice strengthens your resilience and ability to handle life's inevitable challenges. The same principle applies to romantic relationships. Imagine a scenario where your partner decides to end the relationship, despite your efforts to make things work. Naturally, this can be a devastating experience, but instead of exhausting yourself by trying to win them back or dissecting every moment to find where things went wrong, Stoicism advises you to accept the situation for what it is. It's not about denying the pain of a breakup, but rather, about refusing to let it define your self-worth or happiness. By accepting the situation, you allow yourself to grieve, to feel sadness, but without the burden of trying to reverse what's already done. You can ask yourself reflective questions. What did I learn from this relationship? How has it helped me grow? What strengths can I carry forward into my future? In this way, acceptance transforms painful experiences into opportunities for growth, self-awareness, and greater emotional maturity. Stoicism teaches that the external world, including the actions of others, is beyond our control, but our internal world, our thoughts, beliefs, and reactions, belongs entirely to us. The more we practice accepting this distinction, the more emotional freedom we gain. We stop trying to manipulate outcomes, and we become more content with the present moment, as it is. This doesn't mean we stop caring or become passive. It means we stop obsessing over things we can't change, and we invest our energy where it truly matters, on our own development. When we fully embrace this Stoic idea of acceptance, we begin to live with greater emotional clarity and freedom. We are no longer weighed down by the constant need to manage or control what others think, feel, or do. Instead, we operate from a place of self-respect and inner strength. In the long run, this leads to healthier, more authentic relationships, because we are no longer driven by fear or insecurity. We stop chasing validation or approval from others and start living in alignment with our own values and principles. 5. Practical Stoicism in everyday life. Now, it's easy to talk about these concepts in theory, but how can we apply them in daily life? Here are some practical steps to start letting go of trying to convince others and focus on what you can actually control. Recognize when you're trying to control the uncontrollable. When you feel you're making excessive efforts to gain someone's approval, pause. Ask yourself, am I trying to control something that's beyond my power? Accept reality without resistance. Once you identify that you're trying to influence what others think or feel, practice acceptance. It's not about giving up, but understanding that it's not within your power to change others' decisions. Focus on yourself. Use the energy you used to spend convincing others to improve your own life. Read, learn, grow, improve in what you're passionate about. When you focus on yourself, you'll attract the right people into your life. Care for your relationships, but don't depend on them. Relationships are important, but they shouldn't define your worth. Cultivate relationships based on mutual respect and authenticity, not on the need to be accepted. Develop emotional resilience. Situations where we feel we're losing someone can be painful, but each one is an opportunity to strengthen our ability to manage our emotions. Reflect on what you feel and how you can use that experience to grow. 6. Results of letting go of trying to convince. When you stop trying to convince others to stay with you, something incredible happens. The people who truly value you will stay by your side without you having to convince them. Those who don't will simply move on, and that's okay. For example, in a friendship where you've stopped constantly seeking the other person's approval, you'll notice that the relationship becomes more authentic or simply dissolves, which is a sign it wasn't aligned with your true values. At work, when you focus on improving for your own sake and not to impress others, you'll be valued for what you bring, not for your efforts to please. Finally, in love, relationships that are truly worthwhile flourish when both parties accept and value each other for who they are, not for the efforts one makes to keep the other close. And if that relationship doesn't happen, you will have gained something much more valuable, your inner peace. So, instead of trying to convince others to stay with you, do something much more powerful. Work on yourself. Focus on what you can control, on being the best version of yourself, and let the right people come into your life naturally. When you change your focus and stop seeking external validation, you experience an emotional freedom you hadn't felt before. It's not about closing yourself off to others but understanding that your value doesn't depend on what others think of you, but on what you think and do for yourself. Stoic philosophy reminds us that true happiness doesn't come from others but from within ourselves. By stopping the effort to convince others to value us or stay by our side, we open ourselves to more authentic and satisfying relationships and experiences. Stoicism teaches you to live in harmony with your own nature, accepting what you can't control and focusing on what you can. Final reflection example. Think of a plant growing in the desert. It isn't worried about convincing its environment to give it more water or shade. It simply grows and adapts to the conditions it has, using its internal resources. We are the same. When we stop trying to convince the environment, the people around us, to provide what we need, we discover that within ourselves we have the ability to flourish, to be strong and resilient, regardless of external circumstances. At the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is how you choose to live your life and how true you are to yourself. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel like you need to convince someone to stay with you, pause. Remember what you've learned here and ask yourself, what can I do for myself instead of trying to change others? When you stop trying to control others, not only do you find inner peace, but you also make room for people and experiences that align with your true self. And that, in the end, is the greatest gift you can give yourself, a life in harmony with who you really are.